Well, hello there, Penn State fans. It's 11 o'clock on a lovely Wednesday, August morning. Blue-white breakdown time. And yes, your eyes are not deceiving you. It's not Johnny McGonigal. It's not Max Ralph. It's definitely not David Jones joining me if you're watching this. But if you're listening, I am pleased to bring Doug Lesmerises, former Patriot News intern.
Mm.
He's on the very short list, Doug is, in my book, of the most knowledgeable, talented journalists covering college football, specifically nationally, but also within the Big Ten. Used to work for Cleveland.com, knows a ton about the Ohio State Buckeyes, but Doug was also at Penn State Media Day a couple weeks ago, being the thorough journalist that he is, to do some research. Doug has his own highly regarded podcast. If you have not listened to it, the Kings of the North podcast, which is, I believe, his good buddy Bill Landis is part of that as well. Doug, before we start talking about stuff on the podcast, rather than do it at the end when Penn State fans have already checked out on me, why don't you just update us on kind of all the things you've been doing in the last year with Kings of the North and what you're going to be working on this year, maybe differently?
Yeah, so excited. So I'm from Central Pennsylvania. I'm from Palmyra. Bill Landis is a Penn State grad. So we're doing this show. And we both have covered Ohio State for a long time, but we launched this show, Kings of the North. And on Monday, August 26th, it will go to a 5-day-a-week show live on YouTube. Monday through Thursday at noon, and then a post-game show at 11 p.m. on Saturday. It'll be live 5 days a week. And the idea is we want to do a national college football show that's focused on the North so that we can tell the South to cram it. Because we think Alabama and Georgia and LSU and Texas and Florida State get enough attention. And we would just like to remind people that the North plays good ball too. So we took the 28 Power 4 teams in the top half of the country. It's everybody in the Big Ten except USC and UCLA because it's too nice in Southern California. It's the eight northernmost teams in the Big 12, Utah, BYU, Colorado, Iowa State, Kansas State, West Virginia, Cincinnati. It's Notre Dame, and it's Pitt, Boston College, and Syracuse. If it snows on your campus, has the potential to snow, we talk about you. If it's a beautiful 71 degrees in November on your campus, we want nothing to do with you. So that means a lot of Penn State talk, which is why I came to State College for Media Day.
That is a sensational idea. And
Thanks,
you've always kind of been like a little bit, I think, ahead of the curve, although I'm a little bit slow, so that's not really necessarily a compliment to you. But I think it's a great idea. I think that you're talking about teams that are definitely in need of being talked about. I'm also kind of sick of the South. Hopefully this is the year, Doug.
Yeah.
That may be one of those northern teams. I mean, Michigan did do it last year, right?
It started last year. We called it a soft launch last year, and the North rose up to the challenge. We had a Northern National Championship game, Michigan and Washington. It was beautiful.
A national champion, but a champion nonetheless, Doug, and hopefully we can build on that.
Absolutely. And I think Penn State is maybe the pivot team in the North for respect for the North, for opportunity for the North. I think Penn State is the perfect team for the 12-team playoff, and Penn State is such a huge part of what we're going to talk about, and I think vital for what I think has become clearly sort of a north-south dividing line in college football, and it's just one of those things. I don't know why everybody thinks Ole Miss is going to be great. It's like, let's talk about Ole Miss. Give me Penn State, but that's a very interesting. No, don't make a face pop.
Well, they did play recently, and it did not go that well.
But that's just a both don't matter. So, that, I think Penn State and Notre Dame, right? Because Michigan just did it. I think everybody believes that Ohio State and Oregon will be right there this year.
Yeah.
And then you hit that threshold of Penn State and Notre Dame, who have never, Notre Dame's made the playoff, but never won a playoff game. Penn State's never made the 4-team playoff. Can they make the 12-team playoff? They're the teams that I think will help, raise the ceiling of Northern college football, which means all eyes should be on the Nittany Lions this year.
There are always a lot of eyes on the Nittany Lions. There were a lot of eyes on the Nittany Lions last year, Douglas, and it was It was probably the worst 10-win season in program history for Penn State, just given the way they no-showed. I thought they no-showed against Ohio State and Michigan. It's a new year. I'm not so sure they don't have some of the same problems. I definitely want to talk to you a little bit just about Ohio State for the Penn State fan base, because they are always curious about the Buckeyes and anyone else that strikes your fancy, maybe in the 18-team Big Ten that you're going to cover. But Penn State this year, 12-team playoff. You look at their schedule. Some would say it's easier than last year. I'm not so sure that's the case. What if you had to beat the drum for Penn State? It sounds like you are beating the drum for Penn State I know they're ranked in the top 10 preseason, but what do they have going in their favor to make this year different?
So I think a baseline of competence on defense, which is a great place to start.
Yep.
And then the rest is Andy Kotelnicki, right? And I think there's a decent comparison. Ohio State made the national championship game in 2020, but the defense just wasn't good enough. The Ohio State defense just wasn't good enough. And they went and got one of the best defensive coordinators in the country in Jim Knowles and said, like, transform us. And he did a really good job. Now, it wasn't perfect because Ohio State got to that Michigan game and gave up a bunch of huge plays and lost. Yeah. And so now Ohio State has a defensive coordinator in year 3. It's been a bit of a process, but in some ways it was also instantaneous. So Andy Kotelnicki and the Penn State offense doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be substantially better. And so I think the opportunity there, yes, you need to find some playmakers at receiver, but I think the tight end and the 2 running backs are a great place to start. If you believe in the offensive line, you have a quarterback, I think, who has the ability to do it, and you need someone to bring that out of him. So I think it really is. I'm not saying the whole season is that, but it clearly was not good enough offensively last year, and it has not been good enough. And if James Franklin can let go a little bit and Andy Kotelnicki can seize that, my main thing that I wanted to ask, why I came to Penn State Media Day, so I could ask Andy Kotelnicki if Penn State needs to throw more interceptions this year. I basically asked Drew Allar and Andy Kotelnicki the same thing.
I know what you're saying, yes. Yeah, I got you.
I think Drew Allar's interceptionless streak was the worst thing that ever happened to Penn State football.
Yeah.
Because it's like, let's not make a mistake. Let's not give our receivers chances to win 50-50 balls. Let's not try to, to put a ball in a tight window on 3rd and 9 because we don't want to throw an interception. Yep. They had the fewest interceptions in the country last year. I love picks. Throw picks, because sometimes when you give your guys a chance to make a big play, you throw picks. And Andy Kotelnicki, when I kind of asked that, I think wanted to punch me in the throat, but I think he kind of got it. So I have fingers crossed on Penn State letting it rip offensively.
Oh, can you hear me, Doug?
Yes.
All right. Sorry. Yeah, you just cut out a little bit there. I think your point, though, about just being a little bit bolder. They didn't take any chances. They were scared to take chances. They tried to win every game with their defense and any kind of lead they could get. The problem was whenever they fell behind, you saw what happened. They were not ready to do it. They didn't have the receivers to stretch the field. I think there is something to they were not imaginative enough on offense, and you have to take some chances. I just hope. Let's just put it this way, Doug. So yesterday, James Franklin talked about the wideouts that really made a jump in the camp. And the names that came out of his mouth were Harrison Wallace and Liam Clifford. The name that did not come out of his mouth was Julian Fleming.
Yeah.
There's a lot you could probably read into that. You got a long look at Julian Fleming, and I think Penn State fans understand that he is not a typical Ohio State receiver that can change the game on one play. But I also think they also expected him to kind of change things in the Penn State wide receiver room at some point this season, but we just haven't heard much about him. How did you look at him as a wideout at Ohio State? And do you really think he needs to be the number 1 or number 2 option in the passing game for Penn State to take a step forward?
He's a good blocker. So it's one of those like, hey, I always say, like, when a coach starts talking about GPA, right?
Yeah.
When you know you're in trouble, it's like, hey, we get it done in the classroom.
Great
It's like
teammate.
3-9. You were 3-9. We're not in the GPA bowl. He's a really good guy. He did have legitimately injury problems at Ohio State that set him back multiple years. He did, like when Ohio State came back and beat Notre Dame last year, Emeka Egbuka had like the reception down to the goal line at the end of the game that gave him a chance. But Julian Fleming had a catch, I think, on a third down that like kept the drive alive, kept their season alive in a lot of ways. He can make big plays. I think he can be a deep threat. I'm a little surprised that it hasn't been more of Julian Fleming maybe taking it by storm. I'm not saying this is the case, but actually, I don't think it is the case. But every now and then I've decided that like I believe the opposite of what coaches say. Because I think sometimes if a guy's really good, they don't want to praise him because they don't want him to get a big head. And if a guy's having trouble, then they talk him up because they want to give him confidence. So if Julian Fleming hasn't been the first name on every time the receivers come up, maybe they just want to make sure that like he doesn't get ahead, he doesn't get ahead of himself. But I do think maybe it hasn't been quite what people expected. I think he can flash. And I think maybe if Penn State fans think of him as more of a flash player, 1 or 2 big plays a game, which also might be what Penn State needs instead of an every down 8 catches for 115 yards kind of guy. I think that might be a better way for Penn State fans to feel good about this season.
Yeah, and like, Penn State, since James has been here, there's been 3 wide receivers that were in the conversation to be, hey, they could have probably played at just about any school in the country and made plays. One was Chris Godwin, who wasn't really a Franklin recruit, but he broke out early at Penn State, played on the bad 2015 offense. Once Barkley and McSorley came around with Joe Moorhead, legit, like he's shown it in the NFL. Really, really good receiver. KJ Hamler, undersized, but he was a splash. He's the guy you're talking about. 1 or 2 plays a game where he could just change momentum. He had some big plays against Ohio State in 2018.
Oh yeah,
in the game at Beaver Stadium. He was very much that guy. He wasn't a high volume guy, but if he got the ball in space, good luck catching him. And then Jahan Dotson, who was kind of a combination of both of them, undersized but high volume guy who could also take the top off of defense. And he's still getting things figured out at the NFL level, but that's kind of really it. I mean, they've certainly brought in a lot of receivers with 4-star pedigrees, and they just have not worked out. So I don't know kind of what the deal is. They've had a lot of different wideout coaches. I'm sure that's not helped, but they just do not consistently churn out wideouts that scare teams. They are due for somebody to do that. Yeah. I'm not sure the guy is on the roster. They do have a great tight end. They do have 2 good running backs. They have an imaginative play caller. I think the offensive line is plenty good enough. And I think they have 2 quarterbacks that can really hurt defenses in different ways. I'm excited to see what they can do because I do think one of the biggest problems last year, Doug, in addition to maybe the overall talent level of the wideouts, I don't think the OC, Mike Yurcich, really earned his paycheck last year. And the way that James Franklin stepped away from him in season tells me that there was some discord there, and maybe he was not developing guys. Maybe he was ignoring guys. I think Kotelnicki can be a big difference maker. And I do think Drew Allar needs to play with some confidence, but he's also got to be unafraid to take a chance.
Mm-hmm. If you scheme guys open, they don't have to be first round talents to make differences. And so it's one of those things where I think, I want Drew Allar to rip throws into tiny little windows, like in between double coverage. But also, what's great? And this happens at Ohio State sometimes.
Oh, it does.
Marvin Harrison Jr. was great, but it's also, hey, Marvin Harrison Jr. was open by 12 yards on that play. Anybody could have gotten him the ball.
Right.
And I think for the first time since Joe Moorhead, Penn State has somebody who has the ability to do things like that and make it easier on the quarterback. And then sometimes when you hit a couple big plays when a guy's open by 10 yards, then when you need to hit a big play when they are double covered, you have the confidence to do it. So it is, would we rank Drew Allar in the top 5 players in college football this year of the guys who will make the biggest difference? Like if Drew Allar is great, Penn State could be in the national quarterfinals.
Yeah.
And if Drew Allar is not great, Penn State might be 8-4. And that's not to put it all on the kid, but you only put that on somebody when they have the ability and the opportunity to hit the ceiling. So like it's a compliment to Drew Allar, but it's also just an acknowledgement of the defense is going to be the defense. Coach Lnicky's done this before. So the best of Drew Allars would make a huge difference. And I will just say I had Penn State in the Big Ten title game against Ohio State. Like I think the chance is there. I really do think the chance is there.
Yeah, so I was just going to say the ceiling and floor for Penn State would be, but I do know I saw you out in Indianapolis. I think you told me that very same thing, and you were still feeling that way in early August when you were in State College for Penn State Media Day. I was just curious if anything had changed, maybe after what limited practice you saw and the players you talked to. But you do think the best version of Penn State this year, assuming good health, is they are in the Big Ten championship game. Is that
so? I would say when you make a prediction.
Yeah.
4 weeks ago, I think you have the right to change it based on preseason kind of stuff. I don't think I have changed it. I think I'm still now. I will give a caveat. I also have Penn State losing to West Virginia in the opener, which is but just listen. So I think that's going to get a bunch of people on the West Virginia bandwagon because I think West Virginia has a chance to make the Big 12 title game this year.
Yep.
And I think that will give a bunch of people like, oh my God, Penn State's good, which might not be bad for them. So my official Penn State prediction is 10-2 with the West Virginia loss and an Ohio State loss. Mm-hmm. But that's one loss in the Big Ten. I have Oregon running into two goofy losses somewhere with some of the travel. Oregon plays Ohio State. They have to go to Michigan. They have to go to Wisconsin. Could something unexpected trip them up? And Penn State just handles its business. So, because Penn State's problem is not handling its business against lesser talented teams.
Correct.
Penn State's problem is stepping up against more talented teams. So you lose to Ohio State. At West Virginia, I just think people might be underestimating West Virginia. And you handle your business the rest of the time and you're in the Big Ten title game, you're like a 9 seed or a 7 seed. You're right there. And you might end up with some goofball SEC team coming to Beaver Stadium in December, and then it is on. Woo! Right. It's on, baby.
I can't disagree with that scenario. I really can't. I do think, and I'll tell you, Penn State, when they open on the road, they've done it a couple of times in James Franklin's tenure, and it's always been an interesting game. Whether it's they opened against Temple in 2015 and got woodshedded. They barely beat Wisconsin in 2021. They edged out Purdue in 2022. Even when his first game in Ireland against Central Florida was an adventure. They're not the same team away from Beaver Stadium, and how could they be because of that environment? But right out of the gate, I mean, I know I see a line of 10 points, and maybe it'll play out that way. But I do think that West Virginia is a little bit better than I think the fan base realizes, and Penn State's going to have to play 4 good quarters to win comfortably, and I could certainly see a scenario where it's either close or they're going to have to pull it out or they could lose. And having said all of that, the rest of the schedule, I could see 10-2. The one thing I'm a little curious about is USC this year, a team you don't want to talk about, and Penn State traveling out there against a legit passing game. That could be a little shootouty, only because USC is probably going to find a way to score on even some of the better defenses. I think that would be probably my Penn State overplay of the year. If it's 58, I could see that game being, 37-30 or something like that.
Yeah, they're going to put some dynamic guys in the field. Zachariah Branch and Miller Moss threw 6 touchdowns in the bowl game. And, Lincoln Riley maybe is trying to get the defense figured out. But when you talk about what Penn State is defensively versus what USC is defensively, it's okay, unless Miller Moss is significantly better than Drew Allar, then, even on the road, I think I would take the Penn State defense in that situation. But, I mean, it's just going to be, I think we are in for potentially a couple goofy results with the new West Coast Big Ten teams. when they come east, when the Midwest teams go west, and it's like a conference game. But I know, our good friend Audrey Snyder has been like obsessed with the travel plans for Penn State at USC. Obsessed. And it's like, does everybody have a carry-on bag? What, how much are they going to eat breakfast on the plane, not on the plane? But it's like a weird consideration for a conference game. So I think we have to be on alert for all that kind of stuff when it comes to the new teams. And so I think you are correct to at least have the Penn State trip to USC like in the back of your mind at the very least.
Yeah. Doug, you you mentioned that you could see Penn State in the Big Ten title game against Ohio State. You also mentioned that you could see Oregon not making the Big Ten title game. What you haven't said is Ohio State going unbeaten during the regular season?
I don't think so.
All right.
It's a tough trip to Oregon. It fits into exactly what we just said. So they go to Oregon in mid-October. It's a tough trip to Oregon. And in this new world, you get a mulligan. You don't have to be perfect. And so that's like a toss-up game on the betting lines right now. I think that's a reasonable toss-up game. I don't know. I think Will Howard, the Ohio State quarterback, has been good reviews of him in camp. I expect that he'll be named the official starting quarterback this week. In like a Will Howard, Dylan Gabriel shootout, if in a game like that, I think you probably lean Dylan Gabriel right now. Ohio State has great skill guys. Oregon has great skill guys. I think Ohio State has a better defense across the board than Oregon, but that's a tough trip. And so I actually have Ohio State losing that one. But then I have Oregon losing at Michigan and losing at Wisconsin, which again is just, I'm not saying that Michigan and Wisconsin are better than Oregon. I'm saying stuff happens in college football. And that becomes now Oregon, which people think legitimately is a national title contender, is like a 2-loss, non-championship game participant in the Big Ten. And they are the last 8 seed that anybody would ever want to see. And all of a sudden, you're like, Oregon could win the national championship that way. Yeah. I think Dylan Gabriel maybe is a half step back from Bo Nix. And actually, they lost a lot of their skill guys from last year. They still have very good skill, but I think it's a little bit of a step back. So I just think this will be a really competitive Big Ten race, but I think there are maybe going to be some speed bumps that if you just went down the schedules right now and said, who's a better team, who's a better team, who's a better team, you'd probably get to Ohio State undefeated. You get to Oregon only losing to Ohio State. You might get to Penn, but I just don't know that it'll play out that way. But this is where it comes in, right? Penn State and James Franklin have not gotten over the top against Ohio State and Michigan, but they usually handle their business the rest of the time. And this really might be a handle your business kind of season and don't get tripped up. And then all of a sudden, your schedule and handling your business gets you in the playoff.
Yeah, you say that, but in 2017, that loss at Michigan State, and in 2019, that loss at Minnesota, a good Minnesota team, but they
good Minnesota.
Yeah.
Peak PJ.
Yeah. And also, those nefarious 2014 Ohio State Buckeyes won the national championship as the lowest seeded team in the 14 playoff. They lost it early to Virginia, and they won it with their number 3, technically, quarterback. So you're right that things that look one way in September sometimes rarely look that way in late November or early December.
And I think it's good for the sport. I just keep saying, for anybody, I don't know how much feedback you get, Bobby Flo, on Penn State fans who are pining for the 4-team playoff, who don't want to get to the 12-team playoff. I would imagine maybe Penn State is very open to the 12-team playoff. I would guess. But I just keep saying, if your favorite thing about college football are devastating regular season losses that ruin a team's season. Oh, you know what I love? I love when there's a really good football team and they have one bad week and it ruins their season. That's why I love. That's what you love? That's your favorite thing? That doesn't exist in any other sport in the world, where one bad game in the regular season absolutely ruins your chances to reach your goals. But you're like, oh, man, there's nothing better than a great football team with a September loss that it's done for them. What are you talking about? How is that your view of college football? So embrace this. You've got to be good. You don't have to be perfect. And I think for fans, I think for like the mental health of players and coaches, I think for the opportunity of everybody, let's play good ball. Let's not demand perfect ball.
Doug, great points. If Penn State somehow goes 9-3 and does not make the playoff in year
Fire
11.
everybody. Sorry.
I was going to say, what? I'm just saying, would you understand maybe the venom that might come from the in the age of NIL and the age of, hey, we got to get we got to get better players. If they go 9-3 and can't make a 12-team playoff with a team that's got at least, I don't know, in the next 2 years, 10 guys that are going to get drafted, a lot of them very high. Like, what big picture for James Franklin? Part of me wants to say it's great what if they make the playoff and don't win a game? Is that considered a step forward in this era? But I just don't know how much more the Penn State fan base is prepared to swallow in terms of being really a really good team, but not really in the conversation. I don't know how much more they can take.
It's hard, right? Ohio State wants to be Alabama. Penn State wants to be Ohio State. Nebraska wants to be Penn State. Minnesota wants to be Nebraska.
Yep.
Right? It's just everybody is staring up at somebody.
Yeah.
And with longing and being disappointed.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, I got super mad when Paul Feinbaum said the stuff about, like, Penn State's tired of 10-2 James Franklin. Right? Yeah. I thought that was ridiculous because everybody in the SEC who's not Bama and Georgia would kill to be 10-2 every year. You know who would kill to be Penn State? Texas A&M. You know who would be right? I mean, for real. It's like, you're sick. You're going to sit in the SEC and be like, oh, down here, we wouldn't tolerate 10-2 seasons. You wouldn't? You're tolerating 5-7, or you're not tolerating 5. You're firing a coach every 2 years. I mean, Jim Harbaugh is a great example for James Franklin. Michigan, right when you thought, I don't know, Michigan, like they're good, they're not getting over the top. Should they get rid of Jim Harbaugh? They didn't, and look what happened. I think you're at that point with James Franklin. But right when Michigan got to that point, they did it. They made 3 straight playoffs and a 4-team playoff, and then they won the national title. So I do understand the idea of some point, at some point, when you're good, you've got to get over the top. Mm-hmm. But I think I also told you a story. I was on a Disney cruise this summer, and I was in a newlywed show game, and they had the 3 husbands go off and like wait for the wives to give answers, and we're just like talking about what we do. And I talked to a Penn State grad, and we were talking about the college football playoff, and I said, I think Penn State is the perfect team for the 12-team playoff. And he said, but if we make the playoff and lose our first game, I'm not even sure I want to make it. And I was like, oh my.
Yeah.
Like, let's please not think, because that would be a great season. You reach a goal, you get fired up for a huge game. Let's not be super mad.
Right.
If you lose to LSU.
Right.
28-24 in a first round game, but you're part of it. I don't think that can be viewed as a failure.
Right.
It's not the end all be all, but I hope that's not like, we're done. Penn State made the playoff and lost in the first round. That's it. James Franklin has to go. That would seem crazy to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But at some point they've got to get in. They're the perfect team for this. And they've been waiting for a quarterback like Drew Allar. The defense is still good. These 2 backs are awesome. Mm-hmm. It kind of is. I don't want to say it's now or never, but it's now or soon or never or whatever it is, right? Like, if they go 9-3 this year and don't make the playoff, then next year it's like, okay, now and maybe Drew Allar's back, and maybe you add a big time receiver in the portal, and but then Abdul Carter's gone. So I mean, I get it, right? So I don't want to put too much. Yeah. They've been a very good football team. And I just think when you are very good, it's better to think about things as it being an opportunity than pressure.
Yeah.
Why is being good a bad thing?
Right.
Oh, you've been so good. When are you going to be great? It's like, would you rather them be 2-10? Is that what you want? Then nobody has any expectations? Like, acknowledge they've been good, but also acknowledge at some point, a program like this needs to get over the top. So
there you have
good luck.
Doug
Good luck.
Lesmerises,
Good
Kings
luck.
of the North. I want to reiterate this. During the week, 5 days a week, 2-hour live broadcast.
90 minutes. Like
and
noon to 1:30. Yep.
Then on Saturdays at 11 o'clock East Coast time.
Yes.
2-hour podcasts.
1 hour. 11 to midnight. 11 to midnight. Wrap it up.
Yeah. You're so soft. It should be at least 3 hours. Come on.
Listen, I've been pulled back from the brink by my co-host and my owner. I was like, "We going 4 hours a day? What are we doing? 4 hours a day? Like, I can do 4 hours a day." They're like,
you could.
I think I could too. I don't know if anybody would want it or watch it, and my wife would kill me because I do this in my house and she's downstairs and she's like, "You shout so much." So 4 hours a day would be a bit much. But I think we'll have plenty to talk about. We have there's really good football to talk about.
Yeah.
In the Big Ten, but also Utah and Kansas State and West Virginia. Like, there's a lot to really talk about, but I'm glad the Big Ten is good. The Big Ten is good. The SEC is good, but they're not the only good conference. That's all. That's all we're saying.
2 quick ones before I let you go. Will you be at Penn State, Ohio State?
Can I tell you? Oh, will I be at Penn State, Ohio State? That weekend is Ohio State at Penn State and Oregon at Michigan on the same weekend. Banger.
Yeah.
So for us, that's like as good as it gets. And we need to figure out our coverage plans for that, because I think it might be one of us at one game and one of us at the other, because I just think like it's defining. That's Northern Big Ten football at its best. So I love it. Get a chance to go see my mom. I love going to Beaver Stadium. So we'll have to see.
All right. And my last one is, this is a selfish question, just for me, not so much for anyone else, but do you miss writing at all? Because man, as you're so great at podcasting, but you're pretty effing good as a columnist. Is that a creative outlet that you miss at all, or do you just feel like you thought this is your calling and this is the best way I can kind of, there's no limits when I podcast. I can do what I want.
So I always say talking is easy, writing's hard.
Yeah.
So I thought I might miss it more than I do. I also thought, if I'm not writing every day, I'm going to write a book. I have so many ideas. I'm going to write a book. I haven't written in a year. I haven't written 1 page of a frickin' book. So I'm just like, I guess I'll go shout in the microphone today. So I mostly think of it as it's just ideas. So the thing that I would be writing, bang, 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 is the stuff I'm shouting at you right now. Why Penn State is the ideal 12-team playoff program,
right?
And the pivot point of Northern football. Bang, 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 bang.
Yeah.
Well, I can just lean in and scream it into your ear, and then I can go have lunch. And I don't have to figure out if I have a comma in the right place, or did I spell that word wrong? So I would miss thinking about college football and expressing my views about college football, but I don't know that I have to write it. But also, I think we're going to start a Substack, and I might start writing a little bit.
I would be in favor of that, but everything you said makes sense to me, because I feel basically you do sound, listening to you is a lot like reading you, and I think that's one of the best compliments I could give somebody that I really enjoy.
When you read me, it feels like I'm shouting at you as a reader. It's like,
no, but I could just see you getting worked up. I could tell when you were a little worked up when you're writing something, and I was like, well, that's Doug, and he's just passionate, and if he feels a certain way, he's not going to hold back, and that's the way it should be.
Kirk Ferentz, baby. Kirk Ferentz might be what you're talking about.
An all-time classic. If you know, you know. All right.
But it's always a pleasure, Bob. You are. I wouldn't be here without you, brother. So if I do this every day with you, if you want to. I mean, I'm sure your audience would not want that. But I'm here for it. Believe me, they would. Anytime.
All right, Doug. You take care. Have a great season. We'll hopefully we'll circle back when Ohio State's the national champion, or when Penn State's the national champion.
Oh,
I think we're going to have you. I think we're going to have you on the Blue White Breakdown.
Here for it, man. Now, the other thing is, I want to go to the Penn State West Virginia game for the opener, but my credential got denied. Oh. They're like, "Who are you? Kings of the what?" So I've got to beg to get let in. And if I don't get a credential,
this podcast, I'm like, if they only knew, you're gonna do more for West Virginia than anyone ever has.
I might just be in the parking lot watching with fans at their tailgate if they don't let me in the press box, but we'll see. But hopefully I'll see you there.
For a good podcast.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, you know, me and hanging out with West Virginia and Penn State fans, what's better than that?
Yeah. All right, Doug, take care.
Thanks, Bob.